What's up and welcome back. I'm John Stark from MacTheMovieGuy.com, your favorite blind film critic, and today we're going to be talking about The Boy and the Heron. This is now available on Max with audio description done by the Media Access Group. There was no narrator listed on this, which is kind of sad, but gave me less to remember. Thank you. Anyway. Sometimes when they're new names anyway, I have a really hard time committing them to memory. The voice cast here is led by Christian Bale, if you're listening to the English dub, which you have to if you want English audio description. I don't know. Anyway, this is what we've been waiting for, Blind People. Blind People Unite! This film was released theatrically without audio description, so the whole award season, I couldn't comment on this. First of all, it wasn't even released on streaming until like after the Oscar season. So it's like all you had was theatrical, which did not have an audio description a track attached to it. So we were just kind of like told to fuck off and go away, you know? It's just like, but thankfully, GKids sold the streaming rights to this to Max, which really helped. I kind of had a feeling that is exactly where that was going to go because they did that with Belle, and then Belle ended up having audio description on Max, despite not having it in theaters after it was also considered for an Oscar. It didn't win, but it was nominated. This did win, so Max is obviously much happier. They also have a Studio Ghibli little channel thing there. I love Hayao Miyazaki. I am a blind film critic, and I am wearing what do I have? A purple baseball cap on, black sunglasses, and I want to say a Falcon and Winter Soldier shirt on. That's what I'm going to go with. I think that's what I'm wearing today. But so for this, as a Miyazaki fan, I'm not gonna say super fan because the truth is, when I went blind, I had, you know, everybody has like a list of films depending on when you're born that you have to catch up on, and films that you just hadn't seen yet. And I have not seen every single Miyazaki film, and his films do not all have audio description. I know, that's shocking. And I don't want to say which ones because I don't want people to be like, you mean you never saw? Yeah, I never saw that. So I'm not a completionist, and it's something that's going to kick my ass forever because I generally like Miyazaki. But for me, I would say Spirited Away is probably always going to be oddly enough, not my first Miyazaki film either. So you can't say, well, you were a part of that. It's like, no, actually, I had Princess Mononoke before that on DVD, owned it on DVD, saw it before I saw Spirited Away. I also, Castle in the Sky was another one that so yeah. Spirited Away just kind of blows my mind even to this day. Like conceptually what Miyazaki came up with. And this was very reminiscent of that for me. It felt very much like we have a kid who's in like the real world, but then has to go into this other world to save someone. And this world is unlike anything they've really interacted with before, and is this sort of like fantastical reality. And there are parallels to Spirited Away, so I can understand why people were like, oh my god, this might get Miyazaki an Oscar nomination. It's like, because it has vibes of something that a lot of people regard as being his best. It's definitely in the conversation. It's definitely one of the films that people, I would say most people agree Spirited Away is the best, but I don't want to besmirch, because I also really love Howl's Moving Castle. I think people like Kiki's Delivery Service has a lot of fans. Princess Mononoke has a lot of fans. So I'm not gonna say there aren't people who have. I do kind of look at the people who have seen all of Miyazaki's films and think Ponyo's the best film, and I look at you and I go, it's good, but the best. Like those people, I'm like, I don't understand those people. I don't understand the Ponyo people. Those people don't make any sense to me. Um, like, they need to explain to me why they think that film is better than the other Miyazaki films, because I don't get it. Uh, but this is... I was a little let down, only because the hype is... the hype around it is so, like, impossible. Um, Miyazaki himself just carries so much gravitas as he enters any sort of situation. You know, Hayao Miyazaki has entered the chat. Oh my god. It's just like, uh, I mean, I think like Studio Ghibli has made other films that he hasn't directed, and people have just been like, eh, whatever. Sort of like how when Walt died, that little like block of Disney films, like people are like, I don't know. It took a while for Disney. Like other people had to come in that they were called like the Disney Dark Ages until like basically Little Mermaid. And then Little Mermaid was like a whole different thing for them. And people were like, oh wow, well, we're on like a new level now. So Studio Ghibli hasn't found the Little Mermaid era. They're kind of in that when it's not a Hayao Miyazaki film, they're kind of in that like in between, you know, well, Walt died and we haven't gotten the Little Mermaid yet. So people are varying levels of enthused. I'm not going to say there aren't some good Disney movies that are released in that time, just like I'm not going to say there aren't good Studio Ghibli movies, but the enthusiasm is different for each film and the skepticism is much higher. So the fact that Miyazaki was like, by the way, I made another movie, and people were like, oh shit. It's that's why this film won an Oscar. Subjectively, I thought Spider-Man was better, and I wasn't even like beating the Spider-Man train. You know what I'm saying? Like I wasn't even beating that drum. It wasn't my favorite animated feature of last year. But considering that debate was largely about should it be one of those two films, now that I've seen Boy and the Heron, if we're going solely based on movie to movie, I think Spider-Man was a better film. Boy and the Heron feels like Miyazaki is tapping into a lot of the themes that have worked for him before and giving people a version of something he's already done before. And I don't want to like spoil things. I don't want to go into it, but it felt very much like, yeah, this is like a greatest hits compilation. And I haven't even seen all of Miyazaki. So if I had seen the like, I don't know, like 2 films that I haven't seen and then put those in here along with it, I think probably I would have been like, yeah, I feel like this is just really just greatest hits album for him. The audio description was hilarious because so many birds poop in this, and it pointed out all the time. And I love the jubilance, like when people get pooped on by birds, like that happens in this film. They're like, oh my god, I got pooped on. This is a great moment for me in my life. There were just some things that were just so weird and like odd, and I I don't hate odd. I love it. I love when people take swings. But I couldn't quite understand why Miyazaki was taking certain swings and following certain paths. Basically, this film is about a boy who has lost his mother has died, and it takes place during a specific time in Japan that was not great for Japan. And yeah, so it's a period piece. If you go if you pick up what I'm dropping down, it's not current. The kid doesn't have cell phones, and he ends up moving with his dad, and there's this like new woman in his dad's life, and he's having to adjust, and he finds this like interesting place, and there's a heron he keeps seeing, and they warn him. He's warned by old ladies about the history of the mine, and well, and the new lady too. But everybody's like, no, don't go down. It's just a labyrinth, and here legend says that blah blah blah. This. And you're like, of course he's gonna go in there. The movie would be so boring if he didn't. You know, the movie just would. Well, it ends. So he, of course, ends up going into this like other dimension, which is way too bizarre for me to try to explain to you. Uh, but he's basically teamed up with an asshole bird and moves forward through that. Boy and the Heron is a little bit of a stretch of a title. I think the fact that it was originally called How Do You Live, which is based on a real book. There was some debate as to whether or not this would, like, is this original, is it adapted? Because it's inspired by the existence of a book instead of actually adapted from anything that was inside the book itself. It's basically like Miyazaki read this book and then after reading the book was inspired to make this movie, because they reference the book in the movie. It's like amongst his mother's possessions, and it is a real book. So it's a very interesting way to like make a film. It would be like if somebody was like, yeah, I read uh, Dr. Seuss's The Cat in the Hat, and then I made this film that's nothing like The Cat in the Hat, but maybe you'll find some similarities because the last thing I read before this was The Cat in the Hat. You know, I think more filmmakers should do that. Like, what did you do right before you came up with this film idea? Well, I listened to this song. So it's a song that's inspired by John Lennon's Imagine, but it's not Imagine. It's not tied to, it was just the last thing that I listened to before I wrote the screenplay. You know, or I read this book, read this poem, watched this other movie. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, like, what was the last thing that you did before? I think it's funny that Miyazaki tips his hat because we all kind of do that. It's like, what did you just do right before this? Well, I did this. So probably that inspired some thoughts that I had going into this, even subconsciously. So the fact that he was willing to acknowledge that really, I think, speaks more to his love of the book and him trying to make people aware of it than anything else. But it was fine. It's just not Miyazaki's best. That's the thing, is I feel like we threw an Oscar at Miyazaki. I don't mind throwing Oscars at Miyazaki. The dude's a genius. And he's probably had other films where we should have thrown Oscars at him and we didn't, because we didn't have an animated feature category yet. So he should have more than he does. Honestly, I wish we could go back in time and actually give him a director nomination, straight up director nomination, for either something like Mononoke or Spirited Away, and squeeze him into the director race, because his style is so unique and so striking that it's amazing that he is not the one director that hasn't managed to cut through and get that director nomination. It feels like if we're ever going to nominate somebody for animated feature, it should be Hayao Miyazaki, you know, for a directing Oscar. Everybody else just kind of hops in, but there's something about Miyazaki that works almost in a way that when you see Quentin Tarantino, you know what you're signing up for. When you jump in on some of these really stylistic directors, you know what you're getting into. Well, he is that way with his films. His films are all these fantastical journeys. They're not necessarily traditional anime, and they're not necessarily catering to kids or anything like that. They're his very own special thing. And regardless of what age range the film lands with, considering he's got some films that, like Princess Mononoke, he's got something that's a little bit more violent and probably not for kids. this arguably has some themes and stuff. I would say kids are not going to like this as much. I would say older kids will get it, but I wouldn't, like, under 10. I don't think this is really meant for under 10. So they do try a little bit with the English dubbing to make some, like, silly voices and stuff, but I think a lot of the themes here are just going to go over your little kids' heads. If you want your kid to appreciate this, I would just hold off until they were a little bit older. It's a little like Spirited Away. And just showing Spirited Away to like a 7 or 8 year old is just not going to be the same thing as showing it to like a 12, 13, 14-year-old who actually has an ability to wrap their head around the concepts that Miyazaki is tackling. But yeah, he's an excellent director, and I'm glad that we got one more film from him, and I'm glad it was audio described, so I was able to actually watch this thing, because it wasn't looking good there for a while. This film was in theaters without audio description. They felt totally comfortable doing that, which is unfortunate in this day and age that studios still feel the need to do that. GKids. Anyway, audio description for media access group, I thought was okay. I thought it was fine. I mean, I never got lost. It is a fantasy film, and I thought that they did a really nice job with all of the different little transformations, all the various birds and the pooping and there's like a lady who comes in, she's on fire, and I thought that scene was handled well. Yeah, I think, and the portals and the doors, there's a lot of fantasy elements here, and I'm not even really sure the film makes coherent sense without audio description to a visual audience. I don't know how much, you know. I think it's definitely a trip. This is definitely a film that when people watch High, they go, I don't know. You know, like they just get like, you see somebody over there in the corner, and they're just like freaking out. They're like tripping balls, and you're like, oh God, they got high before watching The Boy and the Heron. I feel like this is one of those movies, because at a certain point, I'm just like, well, Miyazaki's taking us on a journey. I don't know where to, but we'll get there eventually. You know? It has a lot of that. That's why I'm comparing it to Spirited Away, because I feel like when Chihiro goes in, she just goes in, and then we're in this world, and the world is just what it is, and you're there, and you're like, I don't know what this world is. It's nothing like ours, but I love it. You know, and so Boy and the Heron is like, how much do you love this world that Miyazaki has created that is unique and totally imaginative? And for me, it just kind of like, he is his own problem, because it's like, ultimately you end up comparing it to other things he's done before, and that's where it falls short. Is I can't say this is my favorite Miyazaki movie. I can't even say this is my second favorite Miyazaki movie. So and because it feels so much like some of the other things he's done before, I'm a little less enthused. But I still think it's a really great film. I just, you know, in a tight race between Spider-Man and Boy and the Heron, I think maybe Spider-Man made bolder choices, and Boy and the Heron relies a lot on what Miyazaki has already done before, and then relied heavily on how much do you like Hayao Miyazaki, when really we should be rewarding him individually, and actually putting his name up there as a director. Does he have an honorable, just a regular lifetime achievement Oscar? Because if not, he should. This is a man who should have his own Oscar for sure, not always being tied to animated feature. Walt Disney has them. It's time. Miyazaki, he ain't getting any younger. So those are my thoughts on The Boy and the Heron, aka How Do You Live? But yeah, so check it out, watch it on Max. This may have sounded a little bit more negative than it is, but the problem is when you talk about really highbrow stuff and you're getting really nitpicky about one of the greatest artists of all time, it just feels that way, but I'm actually like, I really love this film. I just didn't, the bar is just so fucking high. It's like trying to rank the first like 3 Toy Story films. You're like, I don't know how to do this. That's kind of how I feel about Miyazaki films. Is like maybe for me, like again, having missed like a couple of them, I think Ponyo is probably my least favorite, which is why I don't understand the people who are like, it's my favorite. And I would give that maybe like a B plus. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think he goes lower than that. I don't think Miyazaki has ever made like a bad movie before where I'm just like, I don't get this at all. This movie's terrible. This movie's garbage. Get this out of my face. Like that, I've never had that experience with a Miyazaki film before. So even when he's at his like least entertaining to me, it was still like way better than a lot of other films. So, because if nothing else, there's a ton of imagination that goes into it, and this world that just you're opened up to, and you're just like, wow, some dude thought this up. This is amazing. And even with the derivativeness here, it still is amazing. I'm giving The Boy and the Heron an A minus, just not an A. There are a couple other Miyazaki movies that deserve that, and I would give Spirited Away an A plus because it's my favorite, and it is. I would consider that if I could put audio description on that, absolutely desert island film. I would take that with me any day, all day, every day. I love that film, and I think it's beautiful. So, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing, and I'll see you guys on the other side.